This is basically a box that comes on almost all GM vehicles from about the 70s up through the 90s. It's turned upside down right now, but usually it has this mounted against the frame this way so that the pitman arm is on the inside of the frame down. So it's usually mounted on the inside of the frame like this. But what I did is I rotated 90 degrees, and now I'm building mounts to use the original holes and mount to this frame. So I'll be using all the original holes, but it's going to be mounted just differently. And then my lines are right here, and my power steering pump's going to be right about here, so it'll actually be pretty nice setup. So I got a bit of a mess going on here. Originally, since I'm taking this steering box and modifying it for something it wasn't meant to be for, obviously I'm having a little bit of troubles. Kind of show you what I was planning on doing. Originally I was planning on having these bolts come up and thread into the original holes here, but you could see that there was part of this steering pump in the way, so I actually ground it down. But then I found out on this side that when I ground it down, I could only grind it down enough, or if I had to grind it down enough for this to work, I would have cut into these passageways. So I actually exposed a passageway, so now I'm going to have to go over and re-weld all of this or JB weld it to make sure it holds the pressure. Another thing here, I also had to try and grind some of this away to allow for clearance there, and there still wasn't enough, so I decided to scrap that idea. So I'm going to do it a little bit differently. What I'm going to do now, so I have this cardboard template with a round hole cut out. Just slides on here, if I can get it one-handed. Okay, slides on there like that. And then what I'm thinking is, I'm gonna slowly start cutting this away to make a kind of a design that looks similar to something like this, so it doesn't look out of place. So to make some kind of a cool little design or something like that out of this bracket. And then you can see that I left a couple inches extra up top here on this cardboard. So what I want to do here, so you can see, this is going to be done with 1/4 inch plate, so something like that. But what I have to do is I'll have to split it and then weld it back together, or like split it probably 80% of the way, bend it down, and then weld it back together. And then that'll be a mounting flange, so I can have another piece of 1/4 inch or 3/8 that bolts into here. And then there'll be a hole in this with a stud that, you know, so you can bolt it all together. So that will allow for me to pull this off if I ever have to. And then on the inside there's also going to be a bolt. And then what I have here is some cradles that I just took basically a hole saw on the drill press, and I cut these out to my measurements, whatever. This goes on the underside here. Then I got this other one up here sitting here. And then once this is mounted, I'll actually take these cradles and kind of form them into something that looks like just not a square piece of steel. So like on this one I have it like this. That one I'm gonna have to do something a little different because it's offset, because the steering box is pointed a little bit that way. So if you follow the shaft of the steering box, it looks like it goes about where I'll be sitting. So that's about where my steering column will be. And it clears everything on this side. It's going to be kind of a pain in the ass if I ever have to remove the starter, but I should be able to get it from the underside. Anything like this custom, it's always, you know, a game of what'll work, what'll look good. It's kind of a happy medium here. I would have ideally liked to buy one of the expensive boxes that would have been perfect for my application, but for $10, real rat rod away, I want to make this one work with a little extra fab. These panels tacked up and kind of holding this steering box in place. You can see that it ain't moving, it's just tacked. But now I made this little third arm type mount deal, and it's got this angle on it so it'll mount like this to the frame. So what I'm going to do here, because if you look close here, you can see that this isn't tight against the frame because the head of this isn't this far this way. You can see that the steering box is in the way. Right there it's like that. Right there it's like that. So I have this marked so that I can notch this out. So I'm going to take a little cutoff wheel and notch out a little arc on this so that in turn I can rotate this in tighter, which will make it tighter down in here. I don't really necessarily have to do this, but I want as much surface area for contact or service contacts as I can for weld so that it'll also be stronger and look cleaner. You can see here that I have the pitman arm on there and it all clears. Okay, clears with plenty of distance there. That's really the best way I could find to mount this box because it's kind of an unconventional setup with me trying to save some money and making it different, making it cool. But that's what I'll come up with, so just finishing touches now and it'll be good. Starting to mock up the steering here. Now that I have this steering box down here mounted and just kind of held together with some long bolts. I need to get the right bolts from Fastenal because these are actually a metric bolt. They're super close to 7/16, but the 7/16 was actually a little bit wobbly in the hole, so I have to get some metric bolts for that. And what I'm going to do now, you can see this is the original rag joint off this box. Went like that, went on the box, right? And then you have this slip joint. You can see in here it's open all the way through. And there's a slip joint right here that has a lock, has like a spring steel thing that goes in there, and this slides in and out. So if you're, say, like in an accident, or if you need to get the steering column in and out easily, it's gonna slide. Okay. And then here is the U-joint off of the end of the steering column. And this goes into the spline shaft on the end of the steering column, and then this goes to your steering shaft. And there's a bolt in there that locks the steering shaft in. So basically, what I have to do here is, because this is so long, and I really don't have much room here to work with, you can see that's only about 5 inches, and this right here is about 3 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut up 1 inch past this transition here, and then hopefully, because it's a slip yoke style deal all the way through, hopefully I can put this little small shaft onto there, weld it all on, and then this shaft actually fits on here like that, and then locks. I'll probably end up welding this on too. I don't really know yet because I want to make it as safe as possible, and I know this isn't really exactly designed for this application, but it'll work, so I'm probably gonna end up welding that onto there. And then if I ever have to take it apart, I'll just have to take apart the rag joint here and have a removable cover here so the whole column slips out, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna cut this up, shorten it, start mounting this, and then I'm gonna work on mounting the steering column. 3 o'clock in the morning. Still drinking coffee. I'll probably be down here till 5 or 6. Gotta get the steering done on this car. And right now what I'm doing is I'm taking this. You can see this is my extremely long steering shaft. And I'm gonna trim this. So because I'm welding all this together, I don't need these holes and it kind of looks stupid. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna trim these flush and then weld it all. And then it'll be really strong. It's already strong enough, but I'm just gonna do that anyways. You can see right there, I took the original rag joint and there was this 1-inch tube on there originally, and it's either pressed on or welded on from the factory, but I added more welds right there. And then I have the 3/4 inch double D, not the double D you guys are thinking of. That's what it's called. 3/4 inch double D slid inside of that, about 1/2 inch up until this point. And then I welded that. You might not be able to tell. You see, I welded that in there. And then I put this over it. And now I'm welding all this together. Long story short, it's gonna be more than strong enough. And the way I have this set up, it actually fits through the firewall hole, this part right here. So all you gotta do, you slide this off of the power steering, and then you slide it up forward. So that worked out pretty nice. This is a nice short shaft, so this allows me to maximize or minimize my bump steer. So you see with this setup here, I'm gonna have like the traditional 30s hot rod steering that comes up to the side. Some guys run cross steer, but with this big diesel being so low to the ground, I simply don't have space because the oil pan's only 1/2 inch from the ground. So what I have to do, what I elected to do, was make the steering shaft as short as possible so I could have this back as far as possible, because when something is on a bigger radius during travel, you're gonna get less side to or back and forth movement. So the longer this arm, the less bump steer theoretically. Okay, that was important for me. Otherwise, I could have put that really anywhere, you know. But for a 10-inch travel on these airbags, that's crucial to try and minimize bump steer. Right now I'm working on some cross members here for the steering column to mount to. So how this is going to work is it's going to go up in here like so, and then it'll go up to weld it tacked up to this body, this part of the body up here, and then there'll be another side that comes and does the same thing, and then they'll meet together in the center. This will give me a good strong surface to mount to. This is 1 1/4 inch tubing, and it's not that thick, but it's square, so it's pretty strong. And what I did here was I had to notch out part of this so that I can fit this pipe over that little angle channel that you see there, and that'll be welded to that, and then it'll be tacked onto the body. And how I'm tacking on the body is just kind of like the body mount. So I did these little reinforcing plates you can see on this side, and I just have like a piece of 16 or 18 gauge kind of spreading out the load so it's not going to mess up the body. And what I did here was I took a piece of 18 gauge, and you can see I have a slight radius on it because the body is actually radiused in here, and then it's actually radiused up top too this way. So what I did was I just took and put a small radius on this with my brake, and then I laid it out for my strips. So there's a 2-inch strip in here, another 2-inch, and then a 3-inch for the center. If you can see those lines, kind of hard to see. Okay, so that saved me the time of having to roll each of these. That's a good tip. If you can think about it ahead of time, make your piece and then cut out the shape, cut it out after you get it to the shape, then you're only doing 1 piece instead of 3. Structure thing welded up. And now I have my steering wheel mounted in here, and I have it hooked up down in there. You can't really tell, but it's hooked up. And this is about where I want it to sit. I sit there, steering wheel's there. It's actually gonna go that way in about 1 inch, so I'll have a little bit more room to get in and out, but I gotta do a little trimming. And then I have it bungee strapped up to about the right height, so I'm sitting, when I'm sitting I'm looking, basically the wheel is gonna be, I'll just show you, kinda, my head will be about there, so it'll work out pretty nice. I'm really happy with it. This column was like the perfect length almost. You can see here, there's the mounting flanges, so now I just gotta build some mounts that go up to there. And once I move this back about 1 inch, it'll be almost centered underneath that cross member perfectly. So once I build those, then I can build the inner one, because on steering columns you want one towards the front, towards the wheel, and then one towards the tip where everything hooks up. That way it's not, you know, on a pendulum. I can just weld it all up and add the third brace down in here to keep it vertically, and it'll be good. I have these welded in. They're welded in solid now. Then I added another gusset that goes up from the back of this up to here. Let's see if you can really see. Probably can't see. But anyways, that's there. And then like I said, for the tail shaft, I'll make another mount that comes up from this, from the firewall, or straight down or something like that. And that'll give me my final adjustment. And then I'm gonna try and get this as far up and to the right as I can, because my brake pedal's actually gotta go on that side, and it's all gonna be tight. I mean, it's all gonna be, you know, that's kinda how it's gotta be, unfortunately. I would've liked to have the pedal right where the steering column is, but that wouldn't have worked out, just for fitment reasons. So that'll be fun, trying to make that work.
Yeah. Trust issues, misused and abused by a missile. I had to erase like a mistake from a pencil. Looking through her photos, I'll admit I'm gonna miss you. Really, how could I not? After all the shit we've been through. I mean, I started rapping cause of you. Now you're just another.
See, it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it works. Now it's really sturdy, and the brake pedal will fit on over in here, barely. So everything's gonna be really tight, but that's what I had to do, and then the gas pedal will feed up through there. So, yeah. Sucks, the hardest part about this is probably dealing with this body drop, because there's really not much room. Since you drop the body 6 inches, you lose a lot of foot space, and a lot of space for steering column and brake pedal and gas pedal and all that stuff. So, thank God this thing's not a manual, I just wanted to have room. Now that I have my steering column mounted, I know that it's gonna actually get in the way of the dash, so I'm gonna have to notch the dash out. What I did was I took a bunch of measurements from the mounting holes here and from these mounting holes over here and marked the center spot on the column and then measured everything based off of that. And what I'm gonna do now that I have it laid out or measured out, I took it and laid it out on the dash here as good as I could. I used a 3-inch circle because the shaft of the column where it's going to intersect is about 3 inches. And then I can always grind away a little bit more at a time if it doesn't fit. I feel really bad cutting into this because it's perfect shape pretty much, but you know, it is what it is. So worst case, if I ever want to do something with it, it's easy to just patch this. This is going to go bye-bye. I don't need this. So I'll probably end up cutting this and then adding on new stuff so it looks right. But yeah, that'll be that. And then in order to put this in, I actually have to drop my column completely out, which kind of sucks because the way my roll cage is set up here, you can see there's not enough room for it to slide in and have all this stuff tuck in there because it's kind of a deep dash actually. So I actually got to drop the column all the way down, install the dash, and then bring it back up again and hope it fits. So that'll be fun.
With all the shit.
Here's the first test fit. Worked out nice. I'm really surprised that my measurements were pretty damn accurate. Everything's bolted up. The bungee cord's just still sitting there because I'm gonna have to drop it again. You see on this side, if you look, that linkage rod right there is the only thing that rubs. When you turn the ignition, that pulls on it, you see? So that's the only thing that I'm gonna have to modify. So I'll have to drop this column down and cut a little notch in there. I could also probably bend that linkage to get it to clear a little bit better, but I'm not gonna bend it because then you gotta mess with the pull and all that. So I'm pretty happy with that, honestly. It's a lot better than I was expecting for a first try. This damn parts pile keeps getting bigger and bigger. Today, I went and got steering arms for the car. These are 1 3/4 inch drop for a 4-inch drop axle, and these take either an 11/16 rod end, which has a taper on it. I think it's 11/16. Whatever. It takes a rod end, or you can drill them out slightly because they're tapered. for a regular 5/8 bolt. So I gotta drill these out, and then I can mount up my steering, get it close, and it's done. I have these steering arms mounted on here, and then I got my tie rods. These are polished aluminum. They're actually on sale on Speedway, so I got them really cheap. And what I had to do here, this is a 1 3/4 inch drop spindle. But because this is bagged and because my axle is actually almost going to touch the frame rail, I actually have to have this spaced down a little bit lower than everybody else has to have. So I took this little tube and I cut it to a 3/4 inch spacer, and I had a bolt that allowed me to have this spacer in there that was long enough. Okay, and now you can see that there's perfect amount of clearance, and this is as low as the axle is going to go, so there's enough for my finger to fit in case something weird happens. I don't want any rubbing. So that's just bolted onto there, onto the spindle, and I Loctited it. And then here you can see I have my upper steering arm, which I'm actually going to roll the edges so it looks a little bit nicer. But right here I had to grind away part of the steering arm for this brake caliper to slide back and forth. Let's see if you can see it slides. And I had to clear that. Anyways, so I got that, and then right here I have this other steering arm hooked up, and I did the same thing with the spacer here. It's identical length. Then here's the tie rod that connects, another aluminum one that connects all the way up to my pitman arm. And for my pitman arm, what I did was, this was a collared a shaft that was actually tapered for like a like an 11/16 standard size rod end or whatever. So what I did was I took a grinder and I actually ground this down so that this wasn't tapered anymore, so it's just a 5/8 shaft for a Heim. Okay, then I just threw some paint on it. So it goes like that, you get the point, and then the cotter pin still fits. And when you turn this is gonna be hard to do, but turning all of this, the steering linkage isn't hooked up inside yet, but when you turn all of this, you can see that all of this works as it should. Okay, and it goes a lot further than that, but the steering is just hanging up in there because it's not actually hooked up to the column right now. But that's done. Another important thing to notice here is that this tie rod is actually parallel or close to parallel with the 4-link here. Now how some people do this is they have the tie rod end on top of this steering knuckle, or they can have it on bottom. Well, you want to adjust to your specific application. So you want this tie rod to be as parallel as possible to your 4-link. That way when it travels, it's traveling close to the same arc. Because this is a longer radius, obviously there's going to be a little bit of variation, but the closer this is to parallel at your ride height, the less bump steer that you're going to have. Okay, so I have that set up properly, and I'm going to call the steering pretty much good. Happy with how it turned out. I think it looks good, works good.